plugin of the week is the Waves SSL bus compressor, stereo bus compressor. And this is actually the G series stereo bus compressor, which was really like really just, it's a VCA compressor, and it has some basic controls, a lot of fixed switched settings, and it has this incredible ballsy kind of British sound to it, which people love. And primarily, I think this is a very good emulation of it. It's actually kind of an interesting thing because you have like an auto fade control. And the auto fade is actually something that's built in to the original SSL bus compressor. Now, for those of you guys who have worked on SSL consoles, and the SSL consoles back then, the master fader, which was a quad fader, right? The original E and G series consoles were all quad consoles, although people only primarily used the stereo buses from them, the left front and right front bus. It had quad capabilities. And the master fader itself was VCA, so it was actually voltage-controlled amplifiers, which made it accurate. But some people had questions about the quality of the sound of it. And the fader and the VCA compressor are inextricably connected. And the actual console itself had an auto fade control, and when you clicked on it, it would start the process of fading, and then you could actually set the amount of time that the fade would take. And what was really cool is that, like, say you set it to 41 seconds, like I've done here, you could actually adjust the speed while it was playing, so you could speed up the fade out or slow it down at any given point. And it was kind of cool because instead of just grabbing a fader, and you might think, oh, that's an easy thing, but when you look at the scale of a fader, and you would have to look at the scale of an SSL fader, each one of these differences between the numbers here might be 5 dB, but then all of a sudden, somewhere down near the bottom, they become 10 dB for the same amount of movement, and then 20 dB for the same amount of physical movement. And so sometimes it was actually easier to click the auto fade button in and then adjust or vary the time if you wanted the speed if you wanted the fade to quicken up or slow down. And you could record this into the automation, which was really cool. And you could do the same here with the automation within your host application. So it's really kind of a cool feature that goes beyond just like the normal compression controls that people use. So very few people use this. I'm not saying it's like, oh, you got to use this instead of using your fade out, because it's so much easier to program it, visually. If that's the way most of my fades, I just know visually what I want them to be and I draw it, and then adjust it. And that usually does the job. The analog thing adds in the harmonic distortion characteristic of the SSL bus console into it, which has like a little bit of a gritty kind of sound. What's really cool about the SSL console itself is that when you really hammer the output of it, it has an amazing sound to it. Like it just really, really, gets like there's some kind of bus compression, even if you're not using the stereo bus compressor, that kind of kicks in and just gives everything this really, really ballsy kind of sound. It's harder to describe other than that. It's like Neve has a ballsy low end, low mid warmth. SSL has a ballsy mid range kind of sound, if that's maybe a better way to do it. And it's always been like perfect for radio. So a lot of people use it for that way. And primarily there are two ways to use it. You got a threshold, a makeup gain. This one actually has the ability to take away gain, because so many people would actually hit the output too hard. So you have a make down gain as well as make up gain. And then your meter only shows gain reduction. So there's no output control. You would have your stereo meters for that. You have attack and release settings. If you go to auto, then it does auto attack and release. So it auto senses the transients and sustain characteristics and adjusts the attack and release times accordingly. I've never been a big fan of the auto. I've always liked this for its pumping and breathing ability. So I usually my favorite setting is the slow attack and the fast release, 4-to-1 ratio. Now what's interesting is that if you, sort of like the Neve compressor, if you adjust the ratio to the different settings, it will actually it'll change the gain structure slightly. So you won't necessarily hear the gain structure change on this, but what'll happen is you'll see the same amount of gain reduction. And you think, oh, if I'm 10-to-1, I should have a lot more gain reduction than if I'm at 4-to-1 or 2-to-1. But it doesn't really work that way. So it kind of almost like adjusts the threshold internally, so that when you're switching between the different ratios, you're basically getting a relatively close amount of the same gain reduction, so that you can really see which characteristic you want. And so it becomes a little bit more of a subtle thing. So I'm not sure of the audio example here, but here he goes. So when I really kind of do this is like, I kind of set this so it's a little bit more of a thing here, where I have just a little bit of gain reduction that's sort of trickling. And we'll probably have a little bit of a, let's see. And what it does is it just allows the transients to kind of pop through a bit more, which is kind of cool. And it adds like a little, you can really hear it, the punchiness. Also the fact that, well, that gain would be there anyway. So I'm kind of matching my gain. And that's one way to basically use it. The other way to use it is something that is more of the fast attack, but you have like a lower threshold kind of thing. So you're getting a lot of gain reduction. And then, of course, you do your makeup gain accordingly. And this is more of like the crush the mix kind of thing. And what this is basically doing here is, let me see if I can move my audio example here. Is that it's kind of, I still like to have the pumping movement, so I always want to see the needle moving, but what it's doing is it's doing like with the lower threshold, it's just compressing more of the audio signal and pulling it together a little bit more. So you're getting much heavier gain reduction, but you can really do some pretty heavy duty lifting here to kind of pull your mix together. Right, and then you could hear that as opposed to going to setup B, where I have more of the fast release. Let's just kind of go a little bit more towards the settings we had here. And let's just see if we can do like a quick A-B to see which ones. So this is a little bit cleaner sounding, a little more natural sounding. Give you a little bit of punchiness. And then here is here's with it. And you've heard this sound many times, right? Where it's definitely, those transients don't pop out as much, but it kind of gives you like a little bit more overall more volume, which is kind of cool. So each one has its own. Those are the two basic ways that people kind of use them. And of course, there are all the settings in between. You can do whatever you want. It's really amazing if you want to use it on your bus stem. So it's incredible for drums, great for an overall stereo mix. I don't particularly use it on individual instruments, although some people do. But a very, very cool one. And I dig Wave's emulation of this. So there you have it. That's the SSL G Series Master Bus Compressor. Very, very cool one. You get another very cool one by Waves, and one that's kind of worth having in the collection as well. All right, let's move on.